to me on the floor, got up and started sprinting towards the back door and yelled at everyone, "Get up, run, he's coming."
A sheriff's sergeant among the 13 dead in an overnight shooting at a California bar. The sergeant was a 29-year veteran of the police force in Ventura County, California. He was said to be considering retirement this year. At least 18 others were hurt in the melee trying to get out of the club.
It happened, we're hearing, around 11:20 at night, Pacific time. Happened in the Thousand Oaks area, which is a suburb of Los Angeles, about 40 minutes away from L.A. President Trump tweeted this: "I have been fully briefed on the terrible shooting in California. Law enforcement and first responders, together with the FBI, are on the scene. 13 people at this time have been reported dead. Likewise, the shooter is dead, along with the first police officer to enter the bar. Great bravery shown by police. California Highway Patrol was on the scene within 3 minutes, with first officer to enter shot numerous times. That sheriff sergeant died in the hospital. God bless all of the victims and families of the victims. Thank you to law enforcement."
Jonathan Hunt has been covering this story all morning long, and he joins us live with some breaking details. Jonathan, we're beginning to learn about the gunman.
Yes, Steve, Brian Ainsley, no formal ID given to us yet. What we are being told, though, from eyewitnesses is that he was a young man in his 30s or in or around 30. According to those witnesses, he was carrying one semi-automatic handgun, and according to some of the witnesses, he also threw at least one smoke grenade as he came into the Borderline Bar and Grill. According to those witnesses, his first victim was an unarmed security guard right at the front door, and then he just kept picking off those closest to him. The witnesses that we have spoken to say he did not appear to have specific targets, but was simply shooting anybody who he could find anywhere near him. And that bar and grill was packed last night. It was college night. A lot of young people were packed on the dance floor when they first heard the shots, a lot of them dropping to the ground and then fleeing for their lives. Bar stools were used to break windows. A lot of them rushed out the back door, and as they rushed out the back door, Sheriff Sergeant Ron Heelis rushed in the front door. He was the first on scene within 3 minutes of the first 911 calls. The shooting was still going on. He did not hesitate. He went straight into the front, through the front door, came face to face with the shooter, who shot him multiple times. He died from those wounds later in the hospital, and Sheriff Jeff Dean then paid tribute to his lost colleague. Listen here.
Sergeant Hillis was on the force for 29 years, was looking to retire in the next year or so. He died a hero because he went in to save lives, to save other people.
Now, we are getting various descriptions of the shooter from eyewitnesses, but the Sheriff's Department has not released any details officially. We believe that the shooter was not carrying an ID, so they will be IDing him, one assumes, through a fingerprint check. We'll get that all that information. As I say, we have various descriptions. We are in no rush to put those out. Obviously, a lot of those things turn out not to be accurate in the initial hours after these kind of events, so we're not going to rush to ID the shooter until we have it officially from the Sheriff's Department. They also say they are still searching for a motive. That remains unclear at this point. Brian, Steve, Ainsley, back to you.
Thank you, Jonathan. We've heard from so many witnesses. There was one young lady who we saw early this morning with her dad, and her dad was saying, "I'm so relieved that my daughter is okay this morning." She was saying there were prayer circles in the parking lot. I know this is a big hangout for students at Pepperdine University, which is a Christian school, and she recounts what happened. She was on the dance floor for a 21st birthday party, and she said some of her friends are still missing. Listen to Taylor Whitler.
I was dancing on the dance floor, and I clearly heard a gunshot come from behind me, so I glanced back, and it was this taller man with a gun shooting multiple people. We all just kind of froze for a split second, and then everyone booked it and dove to the floor. I saw 3 people get shot by him. As soon as he walked in, he had perfect form. I'm born in a military family, and I've been around guns my entire life. I know a bit about them, and he looked like he knew what he was doing. I went with 11 friends. So far, we've only found 6 of them. We don't know where the other ones are. We don't know if they're okay or not. And the only thing going through my head the entire time was get out. You gotta get out, get safe. Was always a scenario that we went over because of how times can be nowadays and how crazy people can be. I don't understand why this would happen. I didn't think this would ever happen to me until it actually happened.
Wow. We've got Taylor Whitler, who went to the party, 21-year-old birthday party, a friend of hers with a dozen friends. 6 at this hour, according to Taylor, who we spoke to in the last hour, still unaccounted for.
Her dad had told her what to do in those situations. I grew up with a military dad, too, and he always prepared us for situations like that.
Right, and one of the things about they're unaccounted for, that does not mean there's been harm.
Correct.
It just means everybody's scattered. You know, when they said, get out,
Some people probably jumped in their cars. Other people jumped in strangers' cars just to get away from that area.
Sheriff Jeff Dean was on this morning in a press conference. He says he has no idea if there's a terrorism link. Dan Bongino, former Secret Service agent, former NYPD officer, NRA TV host, and host of the Dan Bongino Show, has got a rich law enforcement background. Dan, you've been watching this unfold with us, with eyewitnesses, with law enforcement and press conferences. What's your take?
Yeah, Brian, these bars and club-type environments are very soft targets, and it's for some obvious reasons. When people queue up and get on a line in a bar so that the bar can control who comes in, or the club, there's obviously only 1 or maybe 2 maximum places to enter. Well, what does that mean? Well, when you get inside, it's pretty common for people, once they've entered a location mentally, to always, if they needed to escape, like in a tragic situation like this, to always go out where they came in.
Yeah.
That's why I heard in the thing some of them escaped out the back door. That usually takes a few minutes, though, for them to think through. Because think about it. When you enter a location, your first impulse, if a fire or, God forbid, a shooting, something like this, is to exit out that front. So it probably took a few minutes after the initial panic for people to figure out there was a back entrance to that place. And it's not unique to bars and clubs, but it is a situation they have there. And again, in bars and clubs tend to be uniquely crowded. That's the whole purpose of having these people on a dance floor. So it's a very soft target, a real horrible situation this morning.
So many things, especially most of us are parents, and when you hear stories like this, you know, you remember getting dropped off for college. You know, you have 18 years with your child, and then you have to put them in the hands of, you know, someone else. And it's very scary as a parent. The holiday season's around the corner. Chairs are going to be empty around the Thanksgiving table, and it's just so tragic. People are getting phone calls, Dan. Parents are getting phone calls this morning that their child is never coming home.
Yeah, and I'm glad you did bring up, though, that the fact that some of the people were unaccounted for does not mean they were harmed. It doesn't. You know, in our experience in law enforcement is people don't think about, you know, in law enforcement, we were Secret Service agents, you know, we always think about what we call a reload point. What's your relocation point? God forbid something happens at the location you're at. You know, the average American citizen, thankfully, doesn't have to think like that. You know, they just think about getting out of there. So I can only hope that the young woman's 6 friends are okay, yeah, I was glad you brought that up, because you know, that's a good point.
And you know, because it was a bar and it was college night where young adults as young as 18 could go in, they obviously had a security guard at the front. It sounds like the person was not, however, armed, would ask for ID, and then if you were 21, old enough to drink, you would get a different kind of wristband, as is the case in many bars. But the problem, going back to, and I know down in Florida, everybody has been looking at what happened at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, is when you've got, you know, the point of where people come in, and then you've got 200 people just on the other side of that door. It's such, it's such a, I think one of our guests said earlier, such a rich environment where, soft target, where it would be so easy to kill so many people in such a short time.
So sick, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, I was on that scene with Brian, actually, in Orlando, and I have vivid and disturbing memories of Orlando as well. And yes, Steve, when you're thinking about it, from my prior line of work as a Secret Service agent, you think, what are the unique terrain features of this specific environment that make it specifically dangerous if, say, the president were to go there? And, you know, when you think about churches, I always think it's that everybody's attention in a church is faced towards the altar.
Right.
Well, that's a bad thing, because if you come in the back door, nobody's looking, right? Well, with a club, you have this choke point. You always have clubs. They want to control who comes in, of course, because of what you just said. You're not allowed to have minors in the bar unaccounted for. So you have to have one way in. Well, the problem with that is that also means there's one way out for a lot of people who walked in that door. And in that initial panic, in a very dense populated environment like that, you're going to see, sadly, tragically, inflated body counts because of the density. In other words, you don't have to selectively target people. You can almost randomly shoot and accumulate these really horrific body counts in these places.
So, Dan,
that's how you think about it when you're in the security space.
So when the thing is, when you go into a bar like this, from a long line of bar owners, used to be able to control, because bar fights happen all the time, especially in younger bars. In a place like California, do you believe that the security people have to have guns? Do you believe they should? Do you believe they do?
You know, Brian, I know this sadly becomes a very politically charged question for some of the viewers, but I just ask you to think about it in common sense terms. What's your other option? In other words, there's hundreds of millions of firearms out there now that people have procured, whether they can legally get them or not. What do you do? I mean, what are you going to use against? I mean, I don't understand what you think your other options are if someone like this deranged individual shows up with a firearm intent on murdering, you know, tens or hundreds of people in some cases. What are your choices? We're not, Brian, let's be clear here. We're not talking about good versus bad choices. We're talking about bad versus worse choices. I get the politically charged atmosphere. I've been in it for a long time. But I ask you, yeah, the answer is yes. You have the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a firearm. If you have another way to do it, I am all ears. I've yet to hear one. That's why the President of the United States, Democrats, Republicans, whoever they are, and the most important people in the world are protected with firearms. Your kids are entitled to the same.
All right, so what do you tell the folks that are watching that don't carry guns, like the college students that go into these bars? How do you protect yourself? The young girl we interviewed, she said, my dad was in the military and he trained me and he told me what to do. So with your law enforcement experience, for people watching and they don't have experience in law enforcement, what's your advice? What do you do if you're in a situation like this?
Well, the first thing I do, and these are typically, you know, sadly, a lot of these places are gun-free zones. The first thing I always do whenever I go in a place like this, always, it's the simplest and the best advice I ever got, is find the back door.
That's right.
And I say that, Ainsley, sadly, because most people, as I said to you in the opening here, will not go towards the back door of the place. By instinct, they will seek an escape route in the same place they came in. The back door, it's the simplest advice. Is it going to save your life? I hope so. I can't guarantee anything.
Right.
Like I said, a man with a gun intent on harm, sadly, will rack up a body count. I wish it weren't true. But find the back door.
And apparently, according to local news accounts, a number of the kids, the young adults, ran toward the back. Some of them hid in the attic. Some of them hid in the bathrooms. All right. Dan Bongino, thank you very much.
You got it, guys.
All right, 13 minutes after the top there hour, we're continuing to follow the tragedy out of California. Next, we're going to talk to a sergeant with the Ventura County Sheriff's Department.
This is a Fox News alert. Overnight, 13 people dead, including a sheriff's sergeant, and many more injured after a gunman storms a packed country music bar.
All right, here to weigh in is former DOJ spokesperson Ian Pryor. Ian, I guess you have better information than we have. We're trying to do this 3,000 miles away with reporters on the scene. Do you know yet the motive of the gunman?
No, I don't know that quite yet. I mean, obviously, this is a tragic situation. State and local law enforcement will be on the scene, as will FBI, as will ATF. I think the president tweeted that FBI is there, and together they'll work together to find out what the motive is, and if this is something that, you know, should be a federal investigation. Obviously, there won't be a prosecution because the the murderer is dead.
Sure.
But is it something that's going to be federal, or is it something that's going to be state? There's really not enough information at this point in time to make that determination.
You're right. The FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force is there, the ATF, the local police and sheriff's department. We're going to speak to somebody from the sheriff's department in a couple of minutes. Ian, let's talk also a little bit about the breaking news. Yesterday, the president asked Jeff Sessions to resign, and he did. Essentially, he was fired. Obviously frustrated over the fact that Jeff Sessions was in the campaign, could not then preside over the Russia investigation, had to recuse himself. Aside from that, when you look at Jeff Sessions as Attorney General, not looking at the Russia investigation, he did a lot of stuff that was on the president's agenda for the Department of Justice. Turn that around.
Absolutely. And let me just say it was an honor to work for Jeff Sessions. He's a good person. He was a good boss. And I think he did a very good job as Attorney General. Look, when he took over the Justice Department, you're talking about 8 years of Eric Holder and Loretta Lynch. At that point in time, we had violent crime on the rise. We had a catastrophic drug crisis that was really starting to hit home. Since then, since the Attorney General has taken over, largely without U.S. attorneys for his first year and, Senate-confirmed assistant attorney generals, he was able to put in place policies, and now you're seeing the violent crime rate coming back down. Now you're seeing the drug crisis plateauing. Now there's still a ton of more work to do, but I think he has set the groundwork and the infrastructure at DOJ for his successor to do that.
Now, Ian, we had Judge Napolitano on earlier, and he said when he read the letter that Jeff Sessions sent to the president to resign, that it didn't have a date on it. The president had said, or there was speculation that he might get fired after the election. It happened to be the day after when that resignation letter was handed to the president without the date. Did you ever have a discussion with Jeff Sessions about this? Did he write the letter, weeks ago or months ago?
No, I haven't had any discussions with him. I was last there in July. Obviously, this is something that had been talked about for a while. I think having been at the Department of Justice really since last July was probably when people started thinking that, there may be some risk of this. But he was able to hang on and really do some great things over that course of time.
All right, Ian Pryor, former DOJ deputy spokesperson. Ian, thank you.
Thanks, Ian.
Thanks for having me.
All right, 8:20 here in New York City. It's 5:20 in California, and we're continuing to follow the tragedy out of the Golden State. Next, we're going to talk with a witness who says the gunman pointed the gun at him. It happened at 11:20 Pacific time. A gunman walked into the bar, the Borderline Bar and Grill in Thousand Oaks, and started shooting, apparently indiscriminately. There are some reports that may have set off a smoke bomb of some sort about the time he started shooting.
It's a very popular hangout for college students in that area. It happened to be college country night. We've been interviewing people all morning. One girl said she was on the dance floor. It was a line dance night. We have another guest with us right now. His name is Tyler Spatty. He was at the bar with friends and says the gunman actually pointed the gun at him. And he joins us now on the phone. Tyler, tell us about that moment. What happened?
Well, I was at the bar with my buddies, and they were all by the bar, and I was by the dance floor. And as I walked over by the front door of the bar, all of a sudden I heard shooting to my left, and I looked over, and he was shooting at people, and then he started aiming it toward the crowd that I was in. So I immediately ducked down and started running toward a wall behind me and jumped over it onto some tables.
What could you tell? What did he look like?
He was in all black, and he was, that's all I can know. All I know is when he pointed the gun at me, I was out of there.
What did the gun look like?
The gun was a pistol, but not much, probably .40 caliber, I'm not quite sure, but he started shooting in my direction, and I could hear the whistling over my head, so I ducked down behind some chairs and tables.
Yeah. That is a natural reaction. Get out of the way and hide behind whatever you can. Tyler, did you see any of these smoke bombs that we've heard about?
So after I ducked behind, I waited for a pause in the shooting. And once there was a pause, and I thought he was reloading, so I took off toward the kitchen. And I didn't turn around, but I have heard reports of smoke bombs.
Tyler, you said you were there with some of your friends. Did you know anyone who was injured or shot?
I'm not quite sure. I know a lot of people at Borderline. I guess we'll see here, but I'm praying that no one is hurt. A lot of the friends that I came with are accounted for. So
Well,
Tyler, why don't you, he pointed the gun at you. Did he not line you up? Did you think that he recognized you or wanted to avoid shooting you?
No, it was just aimless shooting in any direction, and he pointed and just started shooting at the crowd that I was in. He was just trying to kill people.
Did you hear him? Did he say anything? Did he yell anything? Was the music playing? What do you remember about that?
The music was playing, and I heard a few gunshots and then turned toward him, and he was just shooting in my general direction, and you could hear the whistling of the bullets and then them hitting. So,
yeah.
I mean, Tyler,
that's about it.
We've talked about these kinds of things, and unfortunately, we do these stories more and more often. You're part of this story. I'm sure that's very surreal for you. What's going through your mind, and if you talked to your parents, and what was their reaction?
It's just unbelievable. It's surreal. I can't believe that this is happening, especially here in Ventura County. It's all quiet here. I've been going there for 2.5 years, and I never thought this would happen.
Yeah.
Did you talk to your parents?
You never do.
Oh, I talked to my parents, and I'm with my family now. Thankfully, my sister decided not to go tonight, or it could have been a whole different story of me looking for her in that chaos as well.
Tyler, when you go to enter the club, can you describe what you have to do before you enter the club? What do they ask for? Who's in front of you?
Yeah,
how much security is there?
So you go in and they check your IDs, and then they have bouncers at the entrance and all around the bar, and sometimes they'll do searches at the front door. It's a very quiet area and really great people, so you just never would think that something this
Tyler,
horrendous would happen.
I heard from one witness, and describe when you walk in the bar, what does it look like? Because we had a law enforcement officer on earlier who said they're now designing bars to where you have to like walk down hallways just to prevent this for security purposes. When you walk in, it looks like you walk up some steps, you walk in, we heard that the lady's checking IDs on the right, then there are the bouncers, and I heard one person say the dance floor is right there in the center, like you can see it from the front door. Is that true?
The what is?
The dance floor?
The dance floor, you can see a part of it from the front door, but it is most behind the wall, and you have to go down 4 or 5 stairs to get to the main area.
And where's the bar? Is it on the right or the left?
The bar is directly in front of the front door, and the stage is to the right of the front door.
And Tyler, last night was college country night, and
Yes.
we'd heard that a couple hundred people were in attendance, mostly kids from nearby colleges?
Yes, I mean, I knew a multitude of people that were there tonight, people from Channel Islands, Kowloon, and Moore Park College.
Tyler, did you see people on the floor, that had been shot?
While I was running away, people were dropping around me. I'm not quite sure. I think that there were bullets hitting around me, so I don't know. I'm just glad to be alive.
All right, Tyler, thanks so much.
We're glad you're alive too, Tyler. Thank
Blaring headlines in the LA Times. Thousand Oaks gunman was 29, drove his mother's car to the bar before silently opening fire. That according to the LA Times.
According to a source they spoke to.
Law enforcement source.
8:30 now here in New York City. It's 5:30 in California.
All right, meanwhile, he did this thought to be taking his own life. We're following the tragedy in California. We just discussed that with an eyewitness. We'll talk to the sergeant with the Ventura County Sheriff's Department to get the latest on the investigation.
Plus, Congressman Kevin McCarthy represents a district near Thousand Oaks, California, where this happened. He's going to join us next.
All right, we are back. Here's a Fox News alert. 13 people fatally shot right now after a gunman fires inside a packed California bar. We also found out that 18 were hurt.
One of the victims, there's his picture, Ventura County Sheriff Sergeant Ron, is it Hewless?
Hewless.
He was a 29-year-old veteran of the force who was getting ready to retire. He was shot entering the building, going in to save other people.
Been on the force for 29 years. Joining us from the scene is Sergeant Hewless's colleague, Sergeant Julie Novak of the Ventura County Sheriff's Department. Sergeant, good morning.
Good morning.
We are so sorry for the loss of Sergeant Hewless. Could you tell us a little bit about this man?
Ron was an amazing guy. He probably should have retired a couple years ago. He could have, but he stayed on because he loved the fight. He loved helping people. He loved protecting people. And he did exactly that tonight by running into this building to save people's lives where there was gunshots. And he's just nothing but a hero right now.
We have heard that the response time was just a few minutes. He was on the scene in no time. He had no idea what was going on inside that club, did he?
He had no idea. And the interesting thing is when you're a sergeant on patrol, you don't really get called to calls, but he was right here and he responded immediately, along with two really brave CHP officers who were on a traffic stop, and they immediately, just let go of their traffic stop and came over to help and assist our department, which is amazing.
How did he get out of there? I heard he was hit multiple times, but you got him to a hospital? How did he get out?
Yeah, so when the CHP officers arrived, the three of them made entry, and of course Ron decided to take lead because that's who he is. So he entered the door first and immediately took gunfire. The two CHP officers, who were very brave, immediately grabbed onto him and performed an officer rescue and drugged him all the way out and got him onto the ambulance, and where he was transported to the hospital and died.
The sheriff said that he, with tears in his eyes, he could barely get through that press conference this morning because he said they were really good friends, that they worked out together. He had to pick up the phone and call his wife and tell her that he's not coming home. And he said he has a son. Can you tell us a little bit about his family?
Ron's a family guy, and he loved his son and talked about him all the time and did stuff with him all the time. He's just overall a really great guy, and it's really sad.
It is terrible. It's a terrible loss for the Ventura County Sheriff's Department. Of course, Sergeant, right now we're trying to figure out what happened. What is the latest?
Investigators are still trying to piece all of this together. There is a lot to go through. I don't think people realize how important it is for them to take their time and meticulously go through to solve and try to figure out why this horrendous thing happened. And it's a hard, painful process, but it's one that we need to go through and be patient with. And, as soon as they get that information, they're going to release it. And I know people want to know, but it's important that we do our job right.
Sergeant, have they ID'd the shooter?
They have not released the identification of the shooter. There's a lot of things that need to get done in the investigation before that's going to happen.
But do you know who it is?
Do I know? No, I don't.
So what's the next step? There's some reports about his mom's car. We don't know all the details right now. What's the next step? They trace the car back to the mom, and then they go to his house and they check computers and phones. What happens next?
Sure, yeah, it's going through the vehicles, it's going through his home, it's looking through his computers, his phone logs, trying to piece together the timeline of how this happened, why it happened, what's the motivation for it happening, and that takes a lot of investigation and follow-up.
Right, there are a number of stories out there, but you at this point are unable to confirm any of those. Sergeant Julie Novak, we thank you very much for joining us, and once again, we're so sorry for the loss there at the Ventura County Sheriff's Department.
Thank you so much.
And for the 11 families, at least, that are now experiencing the same loss. Let's bring in House Majority Leader and California Congressman himself, Kevin McCarthy. Kevin, what's your reaction to what you're seeing now? How does this feel knowing it happened in Thousand Oaks?
That's a very difficult interview I just watched. Here, these first responders, the thought of them going in, just rushing in when they're hearing that they're shooting, not knowing, and this sergeant giving his life. I know we're in the early stages of what's finding out, but there are a lot of families here who just lost loved ones waking up in California. This is not my district, but not far. We need to find out what caused this and make sure this does not happen again.
And of course,
it's just devastating. It seems like it was pre-planned to walk the way he walked in, the reports early of putting out smoke bombs so people couldn't see, and then just opening up fire. It's devastating.
Dressing in all black, beard, glasses, some say trench coat, some say jacket. We did have a 19-year-old or 21-year-old that just joined us and said, I know guns, I've had guns my whole life. This guy looked very experienced, and he got into the right stance, and he was able to reload very quickly. How concerning is that for you, knowing someone could train like that for an incident like this?
It's very concerning. This is some of the things that we've worked on. inside Congress to make sure the background check is actually working, that individuals that we've watched, the common denominator is the mental illness and the others who've been trained, making sure. I watched that one witness talk about have their family in the military, and the way this individual walked in, she described him as it looked like he had been in the military. Are we making sure we're reporting through that this individual should not be on the list being able to acquire a weapon? Because we found before that had failed, and we had corrected that inside Congress to make sure the military was updating those lists.
Indeed, and more details are going to be coming in. We're going to figure it all out in the coming hours, we hope. Let's talk a little bit about what happened on Tuesday, a big election, the balance of power in the Congress, in the House of Representatives, where you are currently the majority leader. Soon, you're going to be in the minority. Paul Ryan's out, and you would like to be the minority leader. Why?
Well, there's lots of reasons why, but I'll tell you, first and foremost, we want to continue to move this country forward. What you found was history. History played against us. It wasn't a wave. It wasn't like in Barack Obama's term where we defeated 63 Democrat incumbents. They have a smaller majority than before. I don't think they ran on an agenda. Their agenda was mainly just to investigate. We're looking for more results. You look at where the economy is today. I'm very proud of the fact that when you look at in the last 49 years of America, unemployment has only been below 4%, 11 months. And 6 of those 11 months and 49 years, we just lived through. What we've been able to transform in the VA, rebuild our military, get this economy moving stronger, combating opioids. We're talking about the future. The Democrats are going to elect the past. Think about that. Nancy Pelosi is Speaker. Steny Hoyer is now running as Majority Whip, and Clyburn, as Majority Leader, and Clyburn will become their Whip. That is the past. I mean, that's the old past. They've all been in Congress more than 25, 30 years.
Well, you have a few months in lame duck session. What will happen there? Because there was some talk about wall funding, that Republicans were going to try to push that wall funding through.
Yeah, we still are in power and have to finish out this term. We know what we need along the border. We need to have secure. No one believes this immigration system is working. It is broken. We watched a caravan come through. We had 2 bills on the floor that would actually change that. Not one Democrat voted for that bill. Just like not one Democrat in the House or Senate voted for this tax bill that actually made this economy move forward. Listen, I worked when we were in the minority before, and we had a bigger obstacle to overcome the majority. Our first goal is to make sure we move America forward. Our next goal is to win that majority back. And when I look at where we lost it in the different districts, like in Oklahoma, in Richmond, Virginia, these are districts that actually were carried by President Trump. We will be back because we will listen, we'll be on the offensive, and we'll have solutions for problems and looking for the future, not for the past.
Yeah, you didn't do as bad in California as everyone suspected, despite the money that poured in from Mike Bloomberg and Tom Steyer. Suddenly, Mike Bloomberg hates Republicans.
You know what? If you want to talk about any type of wave this was a green wave. There was $150 million more dollars. Michael Bloomberg came in with $4 million, $4.5, $5 million, and that's exactly where these seats. They were overwhelmingly proportionate money going through, but that's all right. We will continue to work forward, make those corrections, and we will be back and stronger. But we have a responsibility to the end of the year. We also have a responsibility because we will have a very strong minority that will unite together and continue to deliver results.
All right. He is currently the House Majority Leader, Kevin McCarthy. Thank you very much for joining us live.
Thank you.
And he's declaring his nomination for a minority leader. Democrats sounding the alarm over Jeff Sessions' resignation, saying there could be a constitutional crisis, ! Law professor Jonathan Turley never overreacts. He promises to join us.
Plus, we're continuing to follow the coverage with our coverage in California. Another report live from the scene moments away.
All right, we've been following the shooting, but we're also following this story in the Capitol. Another big story coming out of Washington, D.C. The resignation of Attorney General Jeff Sessions came across yesterday afternoon. Democrats quick to slam his acting replacement, Matthew Whitaker. And our next guest is calling out the double standard, saying their criticism feels a little bit forced. Jonathan Turley is a constitutional law professor at George Washington University. Joins us now to explain. So, Jeff Sessions, because he recused himself and other things, the president wanted him out. He's out. So in comes the acting director. Now the Democrats say he's just trying to stop Mueller. Do they have a case?
I don't think they have a case on these facts. First of all, as you know, I believe that Jeff Sessions has gotten a raw deal. I think he took the action he had to take ethically. To quote Othello, he's more sinned against than sinner in this respect. But the president can choose his AG. As for the acting AG, as I say in the Hill column today, there's a lot of overwrought analysis here. He hasn't done a thing. The president said in the press conference that he did not want to shut down the Mueller investigation. Also, the Mueller investigation can't stop on a dime. It's not like you're cutting off someone's oxygen hose. It's clearly moving towards a conclusion. Even if he wanted to squeeze off resources, I don't think that would be particularly effective, and it would trigger other problems.
But he could actually have supervision over this, and we might actually find out what the marching orders were, which got revamped and they haven't been exposed yet, right? The scope.
That's right. What's curious about me is that at most he has the appearance of a conflict. As I've said in the past, Rosenstein could be an actual and serious conflict. I'm astonished that the Deputy Attorney General never recused himself from overseeing this. Mueller himself has a major conflict. You know, the Democrats have been strangely silent about those conflicts of interest. This one, in my view, is not that serious. There's a difference between a lawyer as a commentator and a lawyer as an acting attorney, the acting attorney general. You have an institutional interest that adheres to that title. The suggestion that he's going to throw away all of his legal training and ethics to be, as CNN said, a stooge is rather unfair.
Right. CNN being unfair, I can't see it. I'm going to have to push back there. Jonathan Turley, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
For more Pick Up His Hill column. Coming up straight ahead, we'll have another live report from the scene of last night's mass shooting in California. That'll be next. But first, I got to check in with Bill Hemmer. He's been tracking this as well. Hey, Bill.
Brian, good morning to you. Been watching your coverage all morning. Another difficult day for the country. We're awaiting more information out of California. We'll get to all of that. Kellyanne Conway is going to join us live. What the president's been told about this so far. Also, you've got the removal of Jeff Sessions as AG. I had this press conference yesterday that was heated, to say the least. There's continued fallout, the examination from Tuesday's vote. So we'll get to all of it. Come join Sandra and me in about 10 minutes. We'll see you at the top of the hour then.
We are back with a Fox News alert. A sheriff's sergeant among 13 dead in a shooting at a California country music bar. His name is Ron Helas. He was a 29-year veteran of the force.
The gunman is dead. The AP reports law enforcement officials have now identified the shooter, but have not released his name.
Jonathan Hunt's been covering this all morning for us and joins us live with breaking details. Jonathan, what's the latest there?
Ainsley and Brian, good morning to you. The sheriff describing a horrific scene, as he put it, when law enforcement first arrived at the Borderline Bar and Grill within minutes of the first 911 calls coming in. They found 11 victims there dead, and they took away the sheriff's Sergeant Ron Helas you were talking about. He died later in the hospital. But for all of the young people who were there celebrating what was called College Night at the Borderline Grill, it was a simply terrifying few minutes after the gunman apparently burst in using smoke grenades and then a handgun. Listen here to one of those witnesses.
I've been coming here for 20 years. My parents took me here as a kid on Sundays when we would go for the Sunday brunch. We all know each other by first name. It's a big country community. The first step to anything is prayer. Prayer is the most powerful thing.
Now, Sergeant Ron Helas was the first law enforcement officer on scene. He heard shooting going on, did not hesitate, walked straight through the front door and was confronted immediately by the gunman, who fired several bullets. And as I say, he was then taken to the hospital and passed away from his wounds there. In about 4 hours' time, we are told, there will be a procession from that hospital to take Sergeant Helas's body to the medical examiner's office. It will be a very tough moment for this community, among what are going to be many tough moments over the coming days and weeks. The bottom line, 11 patrons of the Borderline Bar and Grill killed, the sheriff's sergeant killed, the shooter, who we believe has been identified as a 29-year-old man, but that's all we're being given from officials so far, is believed to have died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Brian and Ainsley, back to you.
Jonathan Hunt, who was scrambled out in a matter of minutes, was reporting on this story in the middle of the night. Jonathan Hunt, thanks so much.
Thank you, Jonathan. This has been our top story all morning, a horrific shooting at a bar in California, leaving 13 people dead, including a sheriff's sergeant. There's his picture. He was among one of the first responders to the scene.
We're getting descriptions of the gunman, who wore all black, seems to have been very experienced, well thought out, knew how to handle a gun, knew how to reload a gun, and is thought to have taken his own life.